So my oldest son, Chase, he's a big guy. He was a big kid growing up. He was 10 pounds when I gave birth to him. And now he is about 6 foot, 6 inches tall. And he's always been a head taller than anyone else just because he's a big person. That's how God made him. But yet Chase, he was also like the youngest person in his class. His birthday's in July, and 20 years ago, they didn't hold guys back for having a summer birthday. So I sent him right to kindergarten when he was 5 years old. And on top of that, poor Chase, he was the child of a teenage mother who was just trying to figure out all of life in general. And so for so many years there, Chase and I, we just kind of sort of took on the world together. And we were both really, really ill-equipped to be able to do this. We were just trying to do our best, but we floundered through it just a little bit. But when Chase was in elementary school, like early elementary school, he was getting really bullied by another kid. So Chase, he was getting bullied in school. And looking back on it, I think that there was probably some bias involved for Chase at that point. When your kid is like a full head taller than all of the other kids in the class, people expected, I think unconsciously really, people expected that he was able to do more than he was actually able to do, more than was age appropriate for him. Being a big kid raised by a 20-something, I think people kind of looked at us trying to kind of figure out what's going on. And they made some judgments and assessments after that. People would assume that because of Chase's size, that he was the bully. And here he is in elementary school and he's getting picked on. And I don't really want to fight this argument. I don't really know how to fight this argument as a young 20-something. But Chase, he's not a perfect kid, but he's more of a gentle giant. He's not the kind of guy that throws his size around. And so he's getting picked on, and this kid would say something mean to him like every single day. And Chase, he would come home from school and he would just cry these crocodile tears down his cheeks, and I wasn't sure exactly how to help him during this time of our lives. He went back to school, and I kept telling him, you know what, just shake it off. Be a better person, be the bigger person, just shake it off, shake it off, shake it off. And looking back, I probably should have advocated for him to the teacher, but I was not equipped to be able to do so. So then he went back, and one day, this kid was picking on him. And he was saying some really mean things about how Chase was dumb and Chase wasn't smart enough to do something. He made fun of Chase's handwriting in class. Then finally, Chase lost it. He said something really mean back to this kid. Something really mean, like way out of his character. And the teacher didn't know what to do. So she said, Chase, you're bullying this other kid. Now go to the principal's office. In today's chapter of Romans, Paul is asking this big question: how are people made right with God? How do we, you and me, how do we get right with God? Or to look at it another way with this big biblical word, how are we justified? Now, the word justified, it gets used a lot in this book of Romans if you're following along with us. And in justified is when someone is innocent, when things are just, when things line themselves up, things are in alignment. But if they have a fault, imagine then they're unjust. They're out of alignment. We all have relationships that are out of alignment, that just aren't lining up like they should. Or we have situations in our lives where something is broken and it needs to be fixed. It's not just. If you want to think about it really, really on a simple level, the word justified, it's if I had never done anything wrong. So when we're justified, that means that we're made whole again, that this thing is not broken. There are broken things in our lives, like relationships where we've been hurt, or we've broken a law, or we said something mean to somebody that we kind of meant but shouldn't have said out loud. And when things are broken, there needs to be a repair. There needs to be reparation. There needs to be amends made. There needs to be able to make this relationship right again. And in Romans chapter 4, Paul is asking the deep question about how do we, as deeply flawed humans as we are, how are we justified to God? How are we made right with God? Now think about this question for a second. Humans have been trying to figure this out, how to be right with God forever. Whether you take ancient civilizations who believed in a god or gods, and they would want to be made right with this god, so they'd offer some kind of animal sacrifice. Christians, you debate all the time on how we are made right with God in our lives. Do we need to do a bunch of good things in order to get on God's good side, in order to restore that relationship? Or do we need to just make up for all the bad things that we did in our lives? So if we don't have that much of a bad thing debt, then maybe we were made right with God. Or what about things like baptism, or what justifies you with God, or communion, or how do we get back into this right relationship with God? And Paul says in chapter 4, this is what he says, "Now, to one who works, wages are not reckoned as a gift, but as something due." What Paul is saying is that when we are hustling and working for that justification in our life, then what we get in return is not a gift, but it's a wage. It's something that we have earned. So if that's not it, then what? You see, for so many of us, we expect that God's going to work the way the world works. But the truth is that in God's economy, we don't have anything to offer. God is God. And Paul is making this case so strongly in chapter 4. In verse 5, he says this. He says, "But to one who is without works, trust him who justifies the ungodly. Such faith is reckoned as righteousness." God's saying, you know what? God just wants you to trust that God's got it all taken care of. God doesn't want you to have to feel like you're hustling and moving and shaking and doing all of those things in order to get right with God. We aren't made right by anything we either do or don't do. We're made right only on everything that God does. And I think it's hard for us as people to just live our lives with that kind of surrender or that kind of dependence. But what about when it comes to righteousness in our relationships with other people? What about how do we shore those relationships up? When Chase went to the principal's office there in elementary school, he let it all out. He told the principal just everything. He said that he was sorry for what he had said, but then he led up all the weeks of things that this other kid had said to him. The principal was a smart woman, so she sent Chase to the guidance counselor's office, and the guidance counselor called that other child in. And the two boys stood there and they listed their grievances that they had with each other. And they kind of let it all out on this sweet guidance counselor. And then the two of them, after that, they apologized. And then they became really good friends for the rest of elementary school. But in order for them to become friends, they had to be made right first. They had to be justified. Friends, this is how it works a little bit with God too. God brings Jesus in to justify us even before you or I were even born, for all of humanity, so that we can have this good relationship, so that us and God, we can become good friends. We've laid it all out onto the table so that we don't have to earn, we don't have to hustle, we don't have to even work ourselves to death in order to be justified. The truth is, God has always been faithful, and God will always be faithful to you and to me. Here's some questions for you to think through here today as you're looking at chapter 4. Number 1, what ways have you tried to justify yourself to God? And number 2, how does it feel when you don't have to work at it? It's not always comfortable for some of us. Thanks so much for joining us in this Romans study. We hope that you'll come back tomorrow as we keep digging through the book of Romans. If you want to receive our text messages every morning that tells you when that next video is ready to go, all you have to do is text the word Romans to the number 320-335-8605, and you'll be on that list. Thanks for being here.